Hello, I'm Lena Monroe, and today I'm going to share a story that's been eating away at me for years. You see, my family had this perfect image, one that was always there, until the day they pulled me into their web of lies. They made up a story to keep me from attending Thanksgiving, but the truth is, I was the only one left out. But what hurt even more than the lie was how deep the deception went. The years of patience they showed weren't just to separate me, they were leading me straight into a dead end. My inheritance? Gone. My house? Sold without my consent. How could I not see it? How did I let them get away with it for so long? You'll want to know what happened next. Stick around. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when I realized how invisible I was. Maybe it was at the family gathering last summer when I tried to speak up, only to be brushed aside like a passing thought. Or perhaps it was when my mother looked right through me, her eyes landing instead on my older sister, the one who always seemed to have it all together. I've never been the one to raise my voice. In a family like mine, it's better to keep quiet, to play the part of the dutiful daughter, and to let the world pass by. That's what it's always felt like, life just passing me by. My siblings, especially my older sister, have always been the shining stars. She's the one with the perfect marriage, the perfect career, and the one who always knows what to say. Meanwhile, I've been left in the shadows, watching from the sidelines, trying to fit in, but never quite making it. It's funny, really. When I was younger, I thought I just needed to be louder to fight for my place. But over time, I realized that it wasn't about the noise I made, it was about being seen. And I was never seen. Not by my parents, not by my family, and certainly not by the people who mattered. I've always been the quiet one, the one who blends into the background, the one whose accomplishments go unnoticed. And so, as the years passed, I learned to keep my head down and my mouth shut. I didn't fight for attention or validation. I just accepted my role as the invisible daughter, the one who didn't cause problems, the one who didn't rock the boat. But something changed last year. Something snapped. It wasn't a big thing, not at first. It was just a comment, a dismissive glance, a fleeting moment that would have been forgotten by anyone else. But for me, it felt like the last straw. It happened during a family gathering. My father, who rarely noticed anything, made a casual remark about my sister's latest promotion at work. He didn't even acknowledge the hard work I had been putting in at my job. I was proud of my achievements, but my father didn't seem to care. He always praised my sister, always gave her the attention, while I was left to make myself small and fade into the background. That day, the frustration started to build up inside me, like a pressure cooker ready to explode. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I mattered too, but I stayed silent. I've always stayed silent. That's how things have been with me. Nothing ever changes, and no one ever notices. The tension in my chest grew, and my heart started to pound. I wanted to fight back, but I was afraid. What would happen if I stood up for myself? Would they finally see me, or would I be pushed away even further? Would my mother tell me I was just being emotional, just being too sensitive like she always did? Would my father dismiss me again like he had done countless times before? I sat there in that family room, the conversation continuing around me like I wasn't even there. My mother and father talked about my sister's promotion and how proud they were of her, while I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy and sadness. I had worked so hard for my job, for everything I had achieved, but none of it seemed to matter. It was all overlooked, and in that moment, I realized something that I had known deep down for years. If I didn't stand up for myself, no one else would. And that's when the idea hit me. The idea that maybe it was time for me to stop being invisible, to stop playing the part of the dutiful, silent daughter. Maybe it was time to speak up, to demand the attention and respect I deserved. But where would that lead? Could I really change my place in this family, in this life? Or would I only make things worse? For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of determination. It wasn't the loud, angry kind of determination that people might expect. No, this was quieter, more resolute. I didn't need to scream to be heard. I just needed to find my voice and use it. But even as I felt that flicker of hope, a part of me remained hesitant. Could I really change? Could I step out from the shadows and into the light? Or would I be rejected, just like I always had been? I know something has to give, I whispered to myself as I stared out the window at the world going on outside, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. But I don't know if I'm ready for the storm that might come. It was early morning when I decided to take that first step. The weight of the decision was still heavy on my chest, but there was no turning back now. I knew this confrontation with my family wouldn't be easy, but I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. Years of being overlooked, ignored, and dismissed had taken their toll, and I was ready for it to stop. I sat in my kitchen, a mug of cold coffee sitting untouched before me, the silence of the house a stark contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my mind. My family had never been particularly warm. We had our moments, but I was always the one who had to fit into their rhythm, never quite allowed to find my own beat. I had spent so many years trying to please them, trying to be what they expected of me, but now I realized it wasn't worth it anymore. If I didn't speak up, I would continue to fade into the background. The idea of that terrified me more than any conflict could. I closed my eyes for a moment, remembering the countless times I'd been ignored or dismissed. The memories flooded back like an uninvited guest at a dinner party. There was the time in my teenage years when I tried to share my interests with my family, only to be met with disinterest. There were the countless family gatherings where I spoke, but no one listened, or worse, laughed it off. My parents, so proud of my older sister, never seemed to think I could do anything right. Those memories, once dim and distant, now roared to life in my mind, reminding me why I had to confront them, why I had to stop being invisible. But there was still that hesitation, that nagging voice in my head, telling me to back off, telling me that maybe, just maybe, it would be easier to stay silent. But no, not this time. I had called a family meeting for that afternoon. It was supposed to be calm, a chance for me to air my grievances without causing a scene. But I could already feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. They wouldn't take me seriously. They never had. But I had to do this. My family filed into the living room, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. My mother, sitting in her favorite chair, gave me an encouraging smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. My sister, always the golden child, sat with her arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. My father sat in his usual spot, a silent observer, as if he didn't have a care in the world. I called this meeting because there are things I need to say. I began, my voice slightly trembling but determined. I was ready to be heard. The room fell silent. For a moment, it felt like I was speaking to myself. But then, my sister spoke up. "You're not going to do this again, are you?" she asked, her voice dripping with mockery. "We've been over this before. You're just overreacting. We all have our issues. You're not the only one with problems." Her words hit me like a slap in the face, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. The moment everything changed came like a sudden storm. My father, who rarely took part in these things, finally spoke. "It's not like we haven't all been patient with you, but sometimes you need to get over yourself. You've been fine all these years. You're making this bigger than it is." And that was it. The floodgates opened. The frustration I'd buried deep inside for so long exploded. I wasn't sure where the words were coming from, but they were there, tumbling out of my mouth in a rush. I'm tired of always being the one who's overlooked, tired of always having to take a back seat. I've spent my life feeling invisible, and I'm done with it. I deserve to be heard too. I was shaking with anger, but there was something else there too. Relief. I'd said it. I had finally said it. For a brief moment, the room was silent. No one knew how to react. Then my sister laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made you feel small, insignificant. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "You're being dramatic. We're all just fine, and you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Get over it." Her words stung. They always had. But this time, they didn't break me. No. This time, I stood my ground. I retreated to the quiet of my bedroom after the meeting, the weight of the moment pressing on my chest. I'd expected resistance, but not like this. The anger I felt was overwhelming, but beneath it was something darker, a sense of betrayal. My family didn't get it. They never had, and maybe they never would. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my head in my hands. Was it worth it? Was standing up for myself worth this hurt? Would it ever make a difference, or would I always be the one who didn't fit in? As I sat there lost in my thoughts, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up, half expecting another message from my sister or my parents, chastising me for my outburst. But instead, it was from an old friend, someone who had always believed in me, even when I hadn't believed in myself. "Hey, I saw what you did today. I just wanted to say that you're not alone. You deserve to be heard, and I'm here for you." The message brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen, and it was enough to keep going. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing: I couldn't go back. The fight had only just begun. I've started this fight, and now I have to finish it, no matter what it costs. I woke up that morning with a sense of finality in the pit of my stomach. The weight of everything that had transpired, the family meeting, the betrayal, the pain of being dismissed, was too much to bear. I had hoped for a change, but it seemed like nothing was going to shift unless I made the hardest decision of my life. The silence was over, and I had to do something about it. The confrontation at the meeting had left its mark on me, but the worst part? The moment I had expected a small victory, something unexpectedly cruel happened. My sister, the one person I had trusted, the one who seemed to see my struggle, had completely turned her back on me. She sided with the others, calling me dramatic and foolish for thinking I was wronged. The sting of betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. I was suddenly the villain in my own story, and I was exhausted from defending myself against those who should have been in my corner. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was I fighting against my family, but now I had no one left on my side. I was truly alone in this battle. The weight of that isolation made me question everything I had done so far. Was this worth it? Was standing up for myself worth the loss of the only people who were supposed to love me? Every day, I had been ignoring the pain, convincing myself that things would eventually get better. But now it felt like I had taken it as far as I could. I was teetering on the edge of giving up. But something inside me still refused to surrender. Just when I thought I couldn't bear any more of this, a message appeared on my phone. It was from a colleague of mine, someone I'd known for years but never considered close. She had witnessed the dynamics in my family and had noticed how I had been treated. "I don't know what's going on, but I've seen what they're doing. You deserve more than this. If you ever need help, I'm here for you." Her words were a lifeline. For the first time since the meeting, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe there were people out there who could help me in ways I never expected. Her message didn't just offer sympathy. It offered practical support. She was willing to help me gather information, legal advice, anything I needed to push back. I didn't know what this meant for the future, but I was finally seeing a path forward. It didn't take long for me to make up my mind. The decision to confront my family had been made, but now I needed a strategy. I couldn't just walk into the next confrontation unprepared. No, I had to have something concrete. I had to make them see me, to show them that I was no longer willing to be silenced. I called for another family meeting. The tension was palpable as I walked into the room. My heart was pounding, but I knew this time would be different. This time, I wasn't just going to talk. I was going to show them that I had the evidence, the information, the proof that I wasn't the only one wronged. My father and sister exchanged nervous glances as I sat down and placed the papers on the table. "This isn't just about feelings anymore," I said, my voice steady. "This is about facts." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with the weight of what I was about to reveal. Then, the moment arrived. I revealed the truth. A long-standing financial manipulation within the family that had been hidden from me for years. I had always been told that I didn't matter, but this lie, this deception, was something that changed everything. I could feel my pulse quicken as I laid it all out in front of them. The numbers, the facts, the lies they had told me. The shock was instant. My father's face went pale, and my sister looked like she might faint. But there was something else in the air now. Uncertainty. They couldn't ignore me anymore. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The family's reactions were divided. My sister, ever the golden child, tried to downplay the situation, dismissing my revelations as exaggerations. She argued that I was reading too much into things, as she had always done, but there were others, some distant relatives, friends who had witnessed the family's favoritism, who couldn't ignore the truth. I could see the cracks forming in the facade that had been my family. The divide had deepened, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. I had finally broken through, but at what cost? As the meeting ended, I retreated to the solitude of my bedroom, feeling the emotional weight of everything. There was a part of me that wished I could go back, rewind the last few hours, and erase the confrontation. But that wasn't possible. The damage had been done. I was left with a critical decision. Should I continue to fight? Should I risk losing everyone, pushing them further away? Or should I walk away, cut my losses, and move on with my life? I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't go back. I'd made my decision. I had to live with the consequences. I've made my decision. Now I have to live with the consequences. I knew the time had come. I could feel it deep in my bones. There was no more avoiding the confrontation. The simmering resentment, the anger, the frustration, it was all reaching a boiling point. For years, I had allowed myself to be quiet, to sit in the shadows, believing that somehow things would change, but that wasn't going to happen. Not anymore. It was time to take control of my life. I gathered my strength, steeling myself for what was about to happen. It was going to be hard, yes, but I knew it was the only way forward. If I didn't stand up for myself now, I might never get another chance. My thoughts raced as I prepared for the inevitable fallout. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my dignity, my self-respect. It was time to be heard, loud and clear. But as the anxiety bubbled in my chest, I couldn't ignore the small voice of doubt that whispered, "What if this makes things worse?" Just as I was about to take the first step, something unexpected happened. An ally emerged, someone from the other side. My cousin, who had always remained quiet and distant, reached out to me. I had never expected her to support me, let alone step forward. But there she was, standing up and offering her help. She had been watching from the sidelines all this time, and now she had seen enough. "I can't just sit here anymore," she said, her voice low but firm. "I've seen how they treat you, and I know it's wrong. I'm with you." The shock of her support left me momentarily speechless. Was this real? Was I really about to gain an ally from within the ranks of those who had been complicit all along? For the first time in what felt like ages, I allowed myself to believe that change was possible. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't fighting this battle alone. The time had come to set boundaries. I didn't waste any more time. I called my mother into the living room for a direct conversation. The silence between us stretched long, but it was different this time. I wasn't silent, nor was I afraid to speak. I let her know, calmly but firmly, that I would no longer tolerate being treated the way I had been. From this moment forward, I will no longer allow anyone in this family to disrespect me. If this continues, there will be consequences, I told her, my voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside. The words felt powerful as they left my lips. It was as if a weight had been lifted. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else dictate my worth anymore. But as soon as I spoke those words, the retaliation came fast. My sister, ever the favorite in our family, didn't waste a second. She lashed out with cruel, biting words, trying to tear down everything I had just built. She mocked me, calling me selfish, dramatic, and deluded for thinking I had a legitimate reason to feel wronged. The sting of her betrayal was worse than I had imagined. Not only was I fighting the family's disrespect, but now I was being attacked by the person who had always been my closest sibling. The one person I thought might understand. But I didn't back down. I stood there, fists clenched, heart racing. She wasn't going to break me anymore. Inside, though, I felt the familiar weight of doubt begin to creep in. Was I making the right decision? The guilt washed over me like a flood. Maybe it would have been better to just walk away. But deep down, I knew that if I didn't fight, I would never forgive myself. I retreated to my room, feeling a mix of exhaustion and defeat. The emotional toll of all this had left me spent. But there was something else, something deep inside that refused to let me give up. It was my pride. It was my voice. And for the first time, I was hearing it loud and clear. Then came the moment that changed everything. As I was about to spiral back into self-doubt, I stumbled across something I wasn't prepared to find. My cousin, the one who had sided with me, had been digging into family matters herself. She found a secret, a hidden truth, a financial scheme that my mother had been running for years, and it was the key to understanding why everything had gone so wrong. My mother had manipulated the family's assets, making decisions that had affected everyone, all while keeping us in the dark. This secret had been buried for far too long. I felt my heart race. This was the evidence I needed, the leverage. It was as if the tides were shifting in my favor, but I wasn't sure what to do with this newfound power. Exposing the truth could destroy everything, but could I really walk away from this? I had to think quickly. My cousin, though an ally, wasn't going to be enough to face this head-on alone. I reached out to her again, hoping that together we could decide what to do with this revelation. But even as I hesitated, a part of me feared the consequences of involving someone else. What if they failed me, just like everyone else had? I was terrified of trusting someone again, but if I was going to do this, I needed her help. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, the antagonist made their move. My mother, sensing that I was closing in on the truth, went after my cousin, using her vulnerability as a weapon. She threatened to expose a secret about my cousin's past that could destroy her reputation and any chance of a relationship between us. It was a final, desperate move, one that left me reeling. I didn't know how to handle this. I had to choose. Stand up and expose everything, or protect those I loved, even if it meant stepping away from the truth. The chapter ended with the weight of that decision on my shoulders. What was the right choice? Should I tear the family apart to make things right, or should I retreat and let the wrongs go unchallenged? The moment I had been dreading was here. I couldn't walk away anymore, but could I really destroy everything in order to make things right? I had made my decision. There was no turning back now. Exposing the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way to put an end to the constant manipulation, the lies, and the disregard for my worth. The truth had to come out, even if it meant alienating myself from the people I had once called family. I had waited too long, stayed silent for too many years. It was time to be heard, no matter the cost. With each passing hour, the nerves began to settle, replaced by a quiet sense of confidence. I could feel the tension in my chest, but it was no longer fear, it was resolve. I wasn't going to allow myself to be silenced any longer. If anything, I now had the strength to face the fallout, knowing I had done what was right. As the truth began to surface, the reactions were not what I expected. Some of my family members, those who had always sided with the antagonist, began to pull away. They questioned my loyalty, even suggested that I was doing this out of spite. The lies, the secrets, and the manipulation I had endured for years seemed to disappear in their minds, replaced by their own judgments of me. The realization hit hard, but some of them, the ones who had quietly watched all these years, began to back me. My cousin, who had always been distant, now stepped forward. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice full of conviction. Her words were like a balm on my battered spirit. It wasn't enough to undo the pain, but it was something. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this fight as I had thought. Still, as I faced my family, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. I wasn't prepared for this level of emotion, but I had to do it. I needed to confront them all, to make them understand why I had done what I did. "I didn't expose the truth to hurt anyone," I said, my voice shaking slightly despite the anger I felt. "I did it because I can't stand by while this continues. I can't be silent anymore. I won't let you treat me this way, and I won't let you keep lying." There it was, my confession. A part of me expected them to break down, to to apologize, but instead they just stared at me, stone-faced, as if they couldn't comprehend what I was saying. I was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what I had just unleashed. But things didn't stop there. Just as I thought I had finally gained a moment of peace, the antagonist retaliated. It started with small remarks, disparaging comments made behind closed doors, but soon escalated to something far more destructive. They began making personal attacks against me, whispering lies to the family, trying to tarnish my reputation. I could see it in their eyes. They were angry, and they were scared. They had everything to lose, and they weren't going to let me take it away so easily. The pressure was mounting, but I stood my ground. If I allowed myself to back down now, it would all be for nothing. The internal conflict I had hoped would fade only intensified. Was I doing the right thing? Was this the best decision for my future? The guilt that had plagued me for years still lingered, whispering doubts into my ears. How could I have let it get this far? But then I reminded myself. I had no other choice. I couldn't live in the shadow of their lies anymore. I couldn't allow their cruelty to continue. In the quiet of my room, I found myself reflecting. The weight of the situation, the constant battle within me, was almost too much to bear. I needed someone to talk to, someone who understood. I reached out to my best friend, pouring out everything that had been building inside of me. She listened, offering quiet words of support and strength. "You're doing the right thing," she said, "but you can't carry this burden alone. Let me help you." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. She believed in me, and maybe, just maybe, I could finally do this. But as soon as I found a small sliver of peace, the antagonist made their next move. They reached out to one of my friends, the one I trusted, and threatened them. They used their vulnerability as a weapon, trying to intimidate me into backing down. The betrayal hit me hard. I had never expected them to go this far. The stakes had just risen. The fight was no longer just about me, it was about everyone I cared about. And if I wasn't careful, I could lose it all. I stood there, staring at the phone, the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on me. I had made my choice. I had taken the first step. But now, with everything on the line, I wasn't sure if I could carry this burden any longer. I had come this far, but what would be left after the final confrontation? I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. The decision had been made. No more running from the truth. It was time to face the antagonist head-on, to expose them for who they truly were. The fear in my gut was undeniable, but so was the clarity in my mind. There was no turning back now. My breath caught as I prepared for the inevitable fallout. I knew that what I was about to do would forever change everything between me and my family. But the cost of silence had become too great. If I didn't speak up now, I might never find my voice again. This was my last stand. As I prepared to take that final step, a surprising phone call came in. It was from someone I hadn't expected, someone from the antagonist's circle. They told me they were ready to support me. "Enough is enough," they said. "This needs to stop." My hands trembled as I held the phone, a mix of disbelief and hope washing over me. Could it be real? Was someone finally going to stand with me? It felt surreal. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend it, but the possibilities it opened up. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this fight as I thought. I wasn't about to waste time. It was time to confront the antagonist. I walked into the room, my feet heavy but my resolve unwavering. The weight of the truth was almost too much to carry, but I had no choice. "You've lied to everyone," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "And it ends today. You can't keep hiding behind your deception." The words felt like a release, like a dam had finally burst. My heart raced, my pulse thundering in my ears, but I couldn't back down, not now. Not after everything I'd been through. The antagonist's face twisted with anger, but they didn't flinch. "You think you've won?" they sneered, the calmness in their voice unnerving. "You haven't. You'll regret this." But then, just as I thought I had everything under control, something shifted. A revelation, one that neither of us had seen coming. "I know about your secret," I said, stepping closer. "I know about what you've been hiding from everyone. The truth will come out now." Their eyes widened for the briefest moment, and I could see the panic rising. I had the upper hand. For the first time in years, I was in control of the situation. The revelation I had just dropped sent shockwaves through the room. The antagonist's defenses started to crumble, but as much as I felt the rush of triumph, I knew it wasn't over yet. The fight had only just begun. "You think that changes everything?" they spat, trying to regain their composure. "This isn't over, you fool." And just as I thought I might have finally gained the upper hand, I felt the sting of betrayal. A family member, someone I had trusted, stepped forward and sided with the antagonist. It was as if my entire world had just collapsed around me. "Are you seriously doing this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "After everything? You choose them?" The betrayal cut deep. It was a blow I hadn't seen coming, and it left me reeling. But I couldn't let it break me, not now, not when I was so close. I took a moment to step away, to gather my thoughts. I had come so far. Despite the pain, despite the loneliness, I knew why I had started this. I had fought for my voice. I had fought for the truth, and I would not let it slip away now. This battle wasn't over. It had just begun. I turned back to face the antagonist, knowing that the tables were about to turn. With the newfound information I had, I could finally fight back. This wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about me taking back control. And then, just as I made my move, I saw it. The antagonist's last desperate attempt to regain control. They were threatening my ally, trying to use their vulnerability against me. It was a low blow, but it was just another sign that they knew they were losing. I felt my heart race as I stared down the antagonist, ready for whatever they would throw at me. The final confrontation was coming, and the truth was about to be exposed for everyone to see. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The antagonist's last move was almost too predictable. As soon as they realized the control they once had was slipping away, they tried to fight back. They twisted the truth, manipulated facts, and used their influence to paint me as the villain in this family saga. They were desperate, and I could see it in their eyes. Panic, frustration. They knew the end was near, but I was ready. For the first time in this long, exhausting battle, I wasn't afraid. They could try to lie and deceive, but the truth was already on my side and nothing could take that away. Just when I thought I was standing alone, an unexpected ally emerged. A cousin who had always stayed neutral in our family's dramas reached out to me. They had information, crucial evidence that I needed to prove the antagonist's deception. The shock hit me in waves. It was relief, surprise, and cautious optimism all wrapped in one. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to feel hope again. I wasn't alone in this fight, but even then, I knew that this support, though valuable, might not be enough to fully shift the power back in my favor. The more I uncovered, the harder it became to trust anyone. The betrayals had been coming from all directions, but nothing was as crushing as the one I discovered within my own ranks. Someone I had trusted had been secretly aiding the antagonist all along. My heart sank as the realization hit. This person had been working against me from the beginning. Shock, disbelief, heartache. All at once, I could feel my foundation cracking. But I had made a promise to myself. I couldn't back down now. No matter how badly the betrayal stung, I couldn't let it deter me. I was in this fight for the long haul. I needed answers. I confronted the betrayer, and the conversation that followed was heavy with tension. "Why?" I demanded. "Why did you side with them?" Their face was a mixture of guilt and fear. "I didn't have a choice," they whispered. "They threatened me, and I couldn't stand up to them." Anger and confusion flooded my chest. I had always trusted this person, but I understood now. They were just as trapped as I had been, manipulated by the antagonist's control. It didn't excuse their actions, but it made me see that there was more to this betrayal than I initially thought. Still, the pain was raw. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. In the heat of our confrontation, a revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. The antagonist, always one step ahead, had been hiding something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The truth behind their motivations, something I had never expected, was exposed. It was enough to completely shift the battle in my favor, but it also made me question everything I thought I knew about them. Shock. Disbelief. The weight of it all hit me hard. I wasn't sure how to proceed with this new knowledge, but I knew one thing. The fight had changed, and I had to use this information wisely. For a moment, I stepped back. Everything had become too much to handle all at once. The emotional weight of it all pressed down on me, and I needed a brief respite. I needed clarity. As I stood there in the silence of my thoughts, I reflected on how far I had come. The sacrifices, the struggles. It had all led me here, to this moment where I had a chance to win. I could no longer afford to be emotional or reactive. I had to plan my next move carefully. But the exhaustion was overwhelming. Was it worth it? Could I keep pushing forward knowing that the next step could be the most dangerous one yet? And then, in a surprising twist, I found myself with the upper hand. Armed with the truth, I exposed a glaring flaw in the antagonist's strategy. They had underestimated me, thinking I would break under the pressure. But this revelation cracked their facade wide open, revealing their true nature to everyone in the room. Triumph. Empowerment. For the first time in this battle, I could feel victory within my grasp. But as much as I wanted to relish the moment, I knew the antagonist would fight back with everything they had. This war was far from over. As I watched the family split over my revelations, I felt the pain of the division. Family members chose sides, and it felt as though everything I had fought for had caused irreparable damage. I never wanted to hurt anyone, but the truth was out now. There was no going back. I was caught between relief and regret, but I couldn't stop. I had come too far to let this fracture tear me apart. The antagonist wasn't done. I could see it in their eyes. Their desperation was palpable. They would stop at nothing to regain control, and I knew it. With my newfound leverage, I had to decide my next move. The stakes were higher than ever, and one wrong step could destroy everything I had worked for. I had to choose. The choice was mine, and I knew it would determine the rest of my journey. The tension between us was unbearable. Every muscle in my body was tight with the knowledge that this was it, the moment I had been preparing for. After months of back and forth, subtle manipulations, and false promises, I knew that the time for indirect moves was over. I could no longer dance around the issue. It was time for a final showdown. My heart pounded in my chest. I had everything to lose, but I was ready. The stakes had never been higher. And for the first time, I felt fully aware of what was at risk. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everything I had fought for. Then, in the midst of our confrontation, the antagonist dropped a bombshell. A secret they had kept hidden for years was revealed. The revelation was enough to shake me to my core. They had information that could destroy everything I had worked for, every step I had taken toward the truth. Shock coursed through me, but it was short-lived. For a moment, I was crushed. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, but I couldn't let it define me. I took a deep breath, and with renewed resolve, I knew I couldn't back down. I would not let them win, not now, not ever. As the antagonist tried to regain control, they manipulated the situation further. They turned on me, trying to make me feel guilty for doing what was right. They wanted me to doubt my own judgment, to question whether I was the one in the wrong. It was their tactic. They always played on emotions, trying to make me feel small, insignificant. But I wasn't falling for it, not anymore. I stood firm, even as the pressure built up. I wouldn't let them break me. Just as it seemed like the antagonist had the upper hand, a surprise came from an unexpected ally. Someone I never expected to have my back stepped forward, offering crucial support and evidence that shifted the momentum. For a split second, I allowed myself to feel hope again. I wasn't alone. The support I needed had finally arrived, and it changed everything. But even with this newfound help, I knew the fight wasn't over. I had to remain vigilant. This was still my battle to win. With the weight of the situation resting squarely on my shoulders, I knew it was time to take the final step. Armed with new evidence, I confronted the antagonist once more. The moment was intense. Every word I spoke was laced with the emotion I had carried for so long: anger, frustration, fear, but also a steady resolve. I had made it this far, and there was no turning back now. Then, in a twist that I could never have anticipated, the true motive behind the antagonist's actions was revealed. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. It was something far more personal, something I hadn't seen coming. Their actions had been fueled by a deep emotional pain, one that had clouded their judgment for years. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of empathy. I understood their pain, but that didn't change what they had done. They had crossed a line, and it was time for them to face the consequences. I confronted them with the truth, my heart heavy but determined. The intensity of the moment was almost too much to bear. We stood there, face to face, knowing that this confrontation would define everything. The truth was no longer something to hide. It was time to lay it all out, to make sure they couldn't twist it any longer. But just when I thought I had won, the antagonist made one final desperate move. They pulled out all the stops, using their remaining influence to manipulate the situation one last time. I was blindsided, caught off guard by this last-ditch effort. Frustration and betrayal surged through me. How many times had they tried to undermine me? But now, I wasn't going to let this be the end. I pushed back, even harder, using everything I had learned along the way to fight for the truth. In the aftermath of everything, I was faced with a decision that would change everything. I could take the hollow victory that was within my reach, but it would mean sacrificing something I had worked so hard to protect. Or I could make a sacrifice, one that could cost me everything, if it meant doing what was truly right. The weight of the decision bore down on me. I had to choose carefully. No matter what I did, it would change everything. As the story unfolded, I realized that the consequences of my actions were irreversible. The antagonist's fate was sealed, and no matter how much I had fought to get here, there was still so much to rebuild. But one thing was certain: I had made the right choice. It wasn't easy. It wasn't pretty. But it was the truth. And now, I had to live with the consequences. The aftermath of everything that had happened settled around me like a thick fog. The confrontation was over, but the dust had yet to fully settle. I found myself reflecting on all that had transpired, the damage that had been done to my life, my relationships, and my sense of self. I had won, but at what cost? A deep sense of relief washed over me, but it was tempered by sorrow. The past couldn't be undone. The echoes of the battle still rang in my ears. I knew, though, that the worst was behind me. But the weight of change, of everything that had been lost, weighed heavily on my heart. Despite the resolution, the fallout didn't stop. The antagonist's influence was far-reaching, and even after everything that had been exposed, the consequences continued to unfold. My life didn't magically return to normal. I found myself picking up the pieces, trying to rebuild, but there was a part of me that wondered if I would ever truly escape the shadow of the past. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could no longer live in its grip. It was time to move forward. Slowly, I began to realize that while I couldn't change the past, I had the power to forge a new path. I didn't have to remain a prisoner of my circumstances. I could rebuild. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it was mine to walk. Hope blossomed within me. Determination grew stronger with each passing day. I was no longer trapped by the chains of my history. I was ready to find my way again. I knew that I couldn't completely move on without facing one last part of my past, the unfinished business that had lingered for too long. Whether it was a conversation, an apology, or some kind of closure, I had to make peace with what had happened. Only then could I truly let go. And so I reached out. There was one final step to take, one conversation that I needed to have to bring closure to this chapter of my life. I found the peace I had been seeking. It wasn't easy, it wasn't clean, but I finally made the decision to forgive, not just others, but myself. Rebuilding trust was not an overnight task. It was slow, painful work. The damage had been done, and the relationships that had been broken required time to heal. But I was willing to put in the effort. I was determined to restore what I could, even if it meant opening old wounds again. Patience was my ally in this new chapter of life. Vulnerability, too. I had to allow myself to be open again, even if it hurt. Just when I thought I was finding my way, someone from my past showed up, an unexpected figure, someone who had once been part of my life, offering help or support in a way I never anticipated. Perhaps this was their way of offering an apology, or maybe it was just a gesture of goodwill. Either way, I found myself feeling gratitude and a glimmer of hope. It was a reminder that not everyone in my life had been part of the chaos. Some people had seen me for who I truly was, and that knowledge gave me strength. With the past behind me, I began to focus on the future. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could build something again. Whether it was a new career, a new relationship, or a new chapter in my personal life, I had the opportunity to create something that truly reflected who I had become. Optimism filled my heart as I looked ahead. There was excitement for what was to come, and I finally felt ready to embrace change. But just as things seemed to settle, life threw one last challenge my way, a final test, a decision that would determine everything. Would I hold strong to my newfound resolve, or would I falter? The uncertainty loomed over me, but I refused to let it break me. I was ready to face this new challenge, whatever it might be. I had come this far, and when that final test came, I faced it head-on, with strength, with clarity, and I emerged victorious, not just over the external forces, but over the internal struggles that had once held me back. Empowerment flowed through me. I had proven to myself that I was capable, resilient, and worthy of the life I had fought so hard to create. As I stood there, looking at the world around me, I realized the true meaning of success. It wasn't about external achievements or titles. It was about inner peace, self-acceptance, and knowing that I had given everything I had to find my strength and my voice. Fulfillment settled in my heart. For the first time, I felt whole. The journey had been difficult, but it had brought me to a place of clarity. As I stood at the crossroads of my life, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The journey that had seemed so insurmountable at first, with its constant battles, emotional turmoil, and moments of deep doubt, now seemed like a distant memory. I had fought hard, but I had also learned so much along the way. Looking back, I saw the full spectrum of my experience, from the early struggles that weighed heavily on my heart to the eventual triumphs that had restored my sense of self. The path hadn't been easy, but it had shaped me into the person I was now. There was a sense of contentment, an understanding that I had not only survived but grown. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had taken the lessons learned from every painful moment and woven them into the fabric of who I had become. There was a deep acceptance of everything I had gone through, and with that acceptance came peace. I felt the calmness settle in my soul. The chaos that had once defined my existence now felt like a distant echo. The resolution had been hard-won, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, I felt an inner peace I hadn't known I was capable of. The battles had been intense, but they had led me here, to this moment of serenity. I was free from the past's grip, and I was ready to embrace the future. Letting go of the grudges and resentment that had once weighed me down was liberating. I no longer carried the burden of anger, and with that came a sense of emotional lightness I had never known before. I was no longer holding on to the ghosts of the past. It felt like I had shed a heavy layer of myself and emerged unburdened, ready for what was to come. The past was no longer a cage. It had been a chapter of my story, but it no longer had the power to define me. I glimpsed what the future could be. There were new possibilities on the horizon, relationships, opportunities, and dreams I once thought were out of reach. I could finally imagine a future not shaped by fear or doubt, but by hope and excitement. The path forward was open to me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that I could take it. I could feel the excitement bubbling inside me, like the first rays of sunlight after a long storm. The future was mine to create. With the past behind me, I began to surround myself with the people who truly mattered. My relationships with family and friends began to heal, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The support system I had once lacked now felt like a solid foundation. There was warmth in knowing that I had people by my side, ready to face whatever came next. For the first time, I felt the security of a community. I had a place where I belonged. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place, life surprised me with a new twist. A new chapter was beginning, an unexpected opportunity, a new connection, or a change that I hadn't anticipated. But that's how life worked, I realized. It was unpredictable, but that's what made it exciting. This new beginning was both unexpected and thrilling. I couldn't wait to see where it would lead. I had shifted from merely surviving to thriving. No longer shackled by my past, I was actively seeking new opportunities for growth, joy, and fulfillment. I felt empowered to take charge of my own future. My vision for my life had expanded beyond just getting by. It was about living fully, embracing the potential I had once been too afraid to explore. The strength to move forward was now mine. As I looked back on everything I had been through, I realized something profound. I had come full circle. I had faced my darkest moments and come out stronger. I had not only survived, but I had found peace with my past. I had turned my wounds into wisdom and now stood ready for whatever life had in store. I could finally say I was at peace with my journey. Saying goodbye to the past was never easy, but it was necessary. Whether through a letter, a final conversation, or just an inner decision, I let go of the remaining ties to what had once held me back. I didn't need to carry the weight anymore. I was free to move forward, to truly embrace the life I had fought for. The past was finally behind me, and I was ready to step into a new future. The most profound shift came when I found my new sense of purpose. Whether it was a passion for a cause, a new career direction, or simply a deeper understanding of what mattered most, I knew what my path was. I had clarity, and with it came an unshakable drive to follow that purpose. I was ready for the future, and for the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to be truly alive. The weight of my journey settled heavily on my shoulders as I stood at the crossroads of forgiveness and acceptance. This moment, this reckoning, was the culmination of everything I had endured, fought for, and finally achieved. I had been through so much: betrayal, heartbreak, but also moments of triumph and strength. It felt as though the final chapter of my story had arrived, and with it, a sense of closure that I hadn't fully realized I needed. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest as I looked back on the path I had walked. Every step had led me here, and now all I could do was reflect on the weight of it all. Regret hung heavy in the air, but so did relief. The end of this journey was no longer something to dread, it was something to embrace. Then, something I hadn't anticipated happened. A voice from my past reached out to me, a voice that had once been filled with hurt and misunderstandings. The person who had caused me so much pain was offering an apology. It was a genuine apology, one that made me stop in my tracks. For a moment I stood frozen, unsure of what to do with this unexpected gesture. It was an apology I never thought I'd hear. I had always imagined the past would remain unresolved, with the wounds of betrayal still fresh. Yet here I was, facing an olive branch I hadn't expected, and it made me question everything I had believed about closure. Was forgiveness possible? Could I accept this? As I considered the apology, something inside me shifted. In my reflections, I realized that I had reached a place where bitterness no longer had a hold on me. Personal growth had taken me to a new level of understanding. I understood now that my journey was not about revenge or holding on to pain, but about freeing myself from the past. It was about finding peace not through the justice of others, but through the understanding of my own soul. The peace I had found was not the absence of pain. It was the ability to live beyond it, to grow, and to move forward without dragging the past with me. The unexpected sacrifice of a loved one brought everything into focus. In this moment, someone dear to me made a personal sacrifice, not out of obligation, but out of a deep understanding of what I had been through. They gave up something important for me, something that reflected the depth of their respect and care. This act of kindness reminded me of how far we had all come. It wasn't just my journey, it was the journey of those who had stood by me, those who had shared my struggles and now shared my growth. My heart swelled with gratitude and sadness. The sacrifices made in the name of love and respect could never be underestimated. I had let go of the past. I made a final decision to release it completely. It was a powerful act, symbolic and real. I burned the old letters, cleared out the remnants of things that no longer had a place in my life. It was time to sever ties with everything that had held me back. The process wasn't easy, but the sense of liberation that followed was undeniable. I was free. It felt as though I had shed a layer of myself that had weighed me down for so long. I was ready for the future, for what was to come next. Just as I was preparing to move on, life threw another curveball my way. An unexpected development caught me off guard. A new opportunity, a new challenge, or perhaps a twist of fate, something I had not anticipated. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt invigorated. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that proved life was always offering new paths, new directions. I didn't know where this new turn would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I was eager to find out. I had survived, yes, but now I was thriving. I was no longer weighed down by the burdens of my past. I had taken control of my own future, and with it came a newfound confidence. The journey was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. The fear that had once paralyzed me had been replaced by courage and clarity. I had become someone capable of navigating the world with a renewed sense of purpose. I stood at the edge of it all, reflecting on the vast journey I had taken. I realized that I had come full circle. I had been to the depths, and now I was emerging with wisdom, peace, and strength. The battles I had fought had shaped me, and the lessons I had learned were now part of who I was. I was no longer the person I once was. I had become someone new, someone who could face whatever life threw their way with grace and resolve. The journey had shaped me in ways I never thought possible, and now I was ready for the future. Saying goodbye to the past wasn't easy. It wasn't just about letting go of memories, but about letting go of the weight that those memories carried. I finally accepted that it was time to walk away from the things that had kept me stagnant. The process wasn't instantaneous, but I knew it was necessary. This was how I would step into a new chapter of my life. Then, in the final moments, I felt the true meaning of everything I had learned. Success wasn't about what I had achieved or the victories I had won. It was about what I had become. I had grown emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. I had learned to live with purpose and peace. I had learned to trust myself, to believe that I could move forward without carrying the weight of the past with me. I had found my strength, and that was success in its purest form. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. It was time to face the truth that had been hiding in the shadows of my past, waiting to be uncovered. The weight of everything I had experienced, every decision I had made, now hung on this final revelation. I stood at the edge of a new chapter, but first, I had to confront the remnants of my old life. The truth I uncovered shook me to my core. It was a revelation that changed everything. The motivations of those who had wronged me were now clear, and the lies I had lived with for so long began to unravel before my eyes. Betrayal, deception, and manipulation. Everything I thought I understood was suddenly called into question. I stood there, feeling the sting of emotional devastation, trying to process it all. How could I have missed this? I had a choice. I could seek revenge, make them pay for everything they had done, or I could walk away and leave the past behind me. The decision was mine, and it was a heavy one. As I stood there, torn between my anger and the need to protect my own peace, I felt the pressure building. I knew that whatever choice I made would have consequences, life-altering ones. The path to freedom was fraught with uncertainty, but I had come too far to back down now. Just as I prepared to take action, the unthinkable happened. Someone I had trusted deeply betrayed me. It was a gut-wrenching moment, one that shattered my already fragile resolve. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had experienced before, and I felt like I had been pushed to the edge. I was no longer sure who I could trust, but I knew I had to act. The time for indecision was over. This was it. I had to confront the betrayer, and I had to do it now. I faced my adversary in the final showdown. The time for words had passed. It was time to act. The tension in the room was palpable as we locked eyes, both of us knowing that this was the last chance for either of us to reclaim control. My heart raced as I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The stakes had never been higher, and I knew that everything I had fought for was about to come to a head. In the heat of the confrontation, I saw a way to fight back, something I had overlooked before. Armed with new information and a clearer understanding of the situation, I turned the tables on my opponent. This was my moment to reclaim my power. With every word, every move, I felt the balance shift in my favor. This was the victory I had been waiting for, the culmination of everything I had endured, but the battle wasn't over yet. The final decision loomed before me. The antagonist had been defeated, but I had to decide how to move forward. I could take my victory and walk away, or I could make a sacrifice that would change the course of my future. The choice wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its consequences, but I knew I had to make it. The future was mine to shape, but the price would be steep. With the resolution of the conflict came the release of all the pain I had carried for so long. The finality of everything was overwhelming, but in the silence that followed, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had fought for justice, and now it had been served. The weight of the past had been lifted, and I could finally move forward. And so, with the past behind me, I began a new chapter. The journey that had once seemed impossible was now behind me. I was no longer defined by my struggles or my enemies. I was free to embrace the future, to rebuild my life on my own terms. The lessons I had learned would stay with me, guiding me toward a future filled with hope and possibility. Just as I thought I had reached the end, life surprised me once again. An unexpected opportunity presented itself, one that I hadn't seen coming. It was a chance for a fresh start, a new path, and I was ready to take it. The journey I had been on had prepared me for this moment, and I was eager to see where it would lead. I had fought my battles, faced my demons, and emerged victorious. But now, I understood that the true victory wasn't in the battles won or the revenge taken. It was in the peace I had found within myself. The strength I had gained was not just from the external victories, but from the inner transformation I had undergone. I had learned to live with purpose and to trust in myself. As I took one last look at everything I had left behind, I knew it was time to say goodbye. To the past, to the people who had held me back, and to the pain that had once defined me. This final goodbye was not a surrender, but a declaration of my freedom. I was no longer bound by the past. I was free to move forward, and with that, I witnessed the ultimate justice being served. The antagonists faced the consequences of their actions, and I realized that my journey had not been in vain. Justice had prevailed, and I could finally close this chapter with a sense of satisfaction and closure. As I stand here today, looking back on everything I've been through, one thing becomes crystal clear. Life isn't about avoiding struggles, but about how we face them. There are times when life throws its worst at us, and the temptation to give up is stronger than ever. But it's in those moments, when we feel the weakest, that our true strength rises. What I've learned is that no matter how deep the wounds are, we can always heal. No matter how many times we stumble, we can always stand up again. We are all shaped by our experiences, by the choices we make, and by the people we allow into our lives. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to decide who we want to be. We can let our past define us, or we can choose to move forward with grace and resilience. So I ask you, how do you want your story to unfold? What lessons can you take from the struggles you faced to create a life that is meaningful to you? It's never too late to make a change. We all have the power to rewrite our story, one choice, one step at a time. If this story resonated with you, if you feel like it's touched your heart in some way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and let me know. Where are you watching from, and what part of this story spoke to you the most? And if you're enjoying the journey, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can follow along with more stories that inspire, motivate, and help us all grow. But if this video wasn't for you, I'd love to know what you think. Your feedback means a lot. Thank you for being a part of this experience with me, and I'll see you in the next chapter.